August reflects National Tradies Health Month. Well, both in Australia and abroad, I guess. It's not really relevant to location. However, with that in mind, I thought I'd bring on a relevant sponsor for the month of August. And I just want to clarify, the company that I've brought on here is not by any ways paying me. We're not in any affiliation or anything like that. I've just approached them and I said, listen, guys, being that it is the tradies, I approached them and said, guys, it's Tradies National Health Month this year. We're going to be creating a lot of podcasts, a lot of content on health and well-being. And, I really believe in what you guys are doing. And I'd like to, give you guys a bit of promotion. And, of course, they were mad for that. So the company I'm talking about is FullScript Gymnastics Strength Training. And I just want to talk a little bit about gymnastic strength training. It's a form of, it's a form of training that I've adopted over the last 5 months, and it's been pretty life-changing. I traditionally came from, I suppose, that CrossFit style training, high intensity style, where you go in there and you just absolutely smash yourself for 60 minutes and then you barely walk out of there. I realized that, in 5, 10, 15 years time, if I kept doing that sort of training, I probably wasn't going to be able to bend down and pick up the kids that I did not yet have. So it was time to change, and I realized that I wanted to do something that was going to help me improve my range of movement, improve my mobility and my flexibility. And also I wanted to be, in a scenario where I was doing activity that was injury preventative. So, I don't want to run the risk of going to the gym and injuring myself. I want to be able to train in a way that's going to, potentially stop me from injuring myself looking forward. So FullScript Gymnastics Strength Training, they're based on the Northern Beaches, right near Warringah Mall. They just opened this amazing new facility, probably the best facility, certainly in Sydney and potentially within Australia. And it really, really appeals to people, that may relate to what I'm saying. If you're bored of this type of training you've been doing, or you're looking at something a little bit different, or you want to improve your range of movement, and you want to be able to do all this stuff, then 100% you've got to come check this out, because it's just a fantastic program, and it's run by Dan and Tori. They're unbelievable gymnastics trainers. Don't freak out. It's not like little girl gymnastics. It's actually made for adults, and it's a very highly researched program which comes out of the United States, and as affiliates, Dan and Tori basically represent that. Anyway, you can head across to the site shed where you'll see a link to that for the rest of the month, and then of course their website, which is fullscript.com.au. You can go along there. If you're on the Northern Beaches, do yourself a favour, go and sign up for their 2-week trial, and also make sure you join their mailing list where you can they'll regularly send out basically free tips on, things that you can do to add value to your life. So, in the space of, becoming more mobile, becoming more flexible, and just little exercise and things that, you can practice on your own in your own time. So it doesn't matter where in the world you are, you can jump on that mailing list and you can get access to that stuff when it comes out. So that's all I wanted to say. Big shout out to Dan and Tori from FullScript. Thank you very much. And go get them, guys.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the Site Shed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Hello listeners, and welcome back to Toolbox Talks on the Site Shed, and you are joining us for part 1 of the Keeping Healthy, Happy and Mobile series that we're conducting, and it's to celebrate, I suppose, well, not celebrate, but it's all part of the Tradies National Health 1 month, which is August 2016. And you would have heard the first episode where we were speaking with the CEO of the Australian Physiotherapy Association, Chris Massis. We had a very helpful, I suppose, insight into what the Tradies National Health Month is. And today we're joined by Mr. David Hall, who is actually a physio. So now we're going to be talking to a man who's in the trenches. David, welcome to the microphone.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Mate, good to have you. Thanks very much for taking the time to speak to us and our listeners. We had a very, very interesting podcast recording with Chris previously, and we covered off on, I suppose, the fundamental elements and, how all that whole Tradies National Health Month movement came about. And it's a fantastic initiative. I just want to say congratulations and thank you so much for putting such an awesome program together. I suppose today we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about a couple of, one, being fit for work, which is the topic of this podcast. So I know that you've got a bit of an expertise in this from both a practical point of view, being that you are a physiotherapist. So why have we decided to talk about this as one of the topics for this series?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I guess being fit for work means different things for different people. So specifically for tradies, so just a little bit of a background on me. So I've been a physio for 20 years. I was initially doing mostly private practice work where you would see a lot of people who come in having suffered from some workplace injuries, both office related and also more sort of manual handling related. And as the years went on, I realised I was at the wrong end of the stick there and really needed to be getting involved with prevention and working with people in the workplace. So the last 13 odd years, that's the work that I've done. I'm what's called an occupational health physiotherapist.
Cool.
So very much working with people in the workplace and at the coalface of, where injuries and aches and pains can potentially stem from.
Yep.
So very much more in the prevention game and also helping to manage injuries when they do occur. So that's been a great progression. And we'll talk a little bit more in future podcasts about some of the big picture on some of this stuff, because it relates to not only what they do, Matt, but also the culture of the workplace that they're involved in.
Yep.
But for today, asking about fitness, so I guess the main thing is relating fitness to the type of work that they do. So whatever role you've got, whatever job you do, there's a certain area of fitness that's important. So if you work in an office, you need to be flexible enough through your hamstrings and neck and shoulders to be able to sit and stand and move around and do what you do.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of tradies, they need to be pretty flexible, particularly through the hamstrings, the lower back, and the neck and shoulders. They also got to have really good core strength. So it's probably one of the key things is that they're core stabilisers, which we can think of as muscles that are like a natural back brace.
Yep.
They need to be in good shape and switched on and protecting their back and helping them be stable and well controlled in their movements during the day.
Yeah.
So that they're loading their body appropriately. We find if people don't have good core strength, they put a lot more load on their joints and on the smaller muscles of their body, particularly their shoulders and their spine. And, that can catch up on them.
Now, it's one of those things, isn't it? Like I'm originally a plumber myself, and I was telling Chris in the last episode, at no stage throughout my apprenticeship or my professional training did anyone ever sit down and talk to me about the way that I should be lifting or the way that I should be digging properly and all this kind of stuff. So I think there's a bit of a disconnect out there with basically what's practically being implemented and what should be implemented.
Yeah, look, there can be, and we find it really it varies a lot from organisation to organisation, and tradies are interesting because they have there's a mix of tradies. Some work within larger organisations, and they'll tend to probably get a bit more good input, again, depending on the organisation, around manual handling training and risk management and, hopefully some good leadership, some good induction, good support, good on-the-job supervision, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But that can certainly vary. And then we see a large proportion of tradies who work sole traders, who might not necessarily get good input with that. They might be lucky enough to work with some people who, a bit of peer learning can happen. But no, you're absolutely right. They're a group. It sounds like you had that background where some of them will miss out on that. And it's particularly important. What we realise now, it's particularly important that they're really sharp and switched on around risk management and making good decisions about what they should do, what they shouldn't do, how they should do it, what tools and equipment is going to make that job easier. Do they need more help? If they got the right tools and equipment for the job? So all of these sorts of considerations are particularly important, even more so than technique. We've seen over the years it's good to know about bending the knees and keeping the loads close to the body and how to handle objects well. But certainly the evidence suggesting that the decision-making is really the key. Is this job good to go? Do I need to think about it a bit more? Do I need to plan this a bit better? Do I need to get more help?
Yeah.
So that risk management process is really the difference between aches and pains and not.
I suppose the key and one of the reasons why I wanted to have you guys on the show is so that we can hopefully communicate to the listeners out there things that they might be able to do today to prevent them having to prevent injury. I imagine you're in a scenario as a physiotherapist where the majority of the clients that you see are it's sort of post-issue as opposed to
well,
pre.
certainly in the early days, it was in the early days, and that's where my career has very much shifted towards the prevention, which has been very rewarding. But speaking from most physios, we do sort of interact with people post-injury. But I think that the key thing is when you talk to tradies who've been in the game for a long time, almost every single one of them, without any sort of question, would say, "Oh, look, I'd love my time again as a younger professional in that field, and I'd do things differently." So just trying to sort of instill, and we talk about putting wise heads on younger bodies, but instill some of that thinking into some of the younger tradies who think they're invincible is the challenge. And there's some good programs out there that really try to embed that. Out of Tasmania, there's a great safety circle culture training comes out of Tassie that's very much about that. And there's other programs that are very much around how do we work within our limits and know to ask for help when we need to. But yeah, it's really a common story from the tradies that have been around for a long time, and their bodies starting to become a factor in their working life, and obviously that affects their income. That affects how they. You talked about with Chris how that affects their place, I guess, in the family and in the community, and how valued they feel in the whole sort of community that they live in. So it's a broader picture than just avoiding injury. It's also about their ability to connect with the world around them. So that's a big thing.
Realistically, okay, we're talking. So I probably, like a very large number of our listeners out there, I've been down that path of, I was a tradesman out there, doing typical tradie things, digging, lifting, all that kind of stuff, and doing a lot of training as well, but high intensity interval training, CrossFit, all that kind of stuff. And then over the last 6 months or so, I've taken a bit of a diversion in my training, and I've gone to more of like a gymnastics foundational sort of style training, just so I can improve things like mobility, flexibility, core strength, and all this kind of stuff. Because the realization that I made was, in 5, 10, 15, years time, if I don't start doing something now, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble then, kind of thing. So the reality, I think, behind this conversation is there's a lot of people out there that probably have good intentions, and they go to the gym and they train and they're doing all this stuff, but they may well be doing things that may not be serving them in the long term. Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the three key things in terms of being fit for purpose to do your job well and not be in as much risk of injury is A, the core strength that we spoke about.
Yeah.
B is being flexible enough to, that you can do your job without straining your body. And then the third one that we haven't mentioned yet in the podcast is around body awareness. So just really being really conscious of how you do things and making good decisions and using, making good decisions around how we do this stuff as well.
Yeah. So
if we looked at those three, so with core strength, probably one of the things that we see, and Matt, potentially this was something that you might have done as well, is we're a little bit too much focus with the training on the big power muscles, like the pecs and whatnot, and maybe not as much focus on those more core stabilizing muscles. Yeah. So the ones that are the foundation. I was just working with a client yesterday, and I said, look, you wouldn't build a house without a strong foundation. The house wouldn't be stable. And similarly, what you need to do is Pilates-style exercise.
Yeah.
And that can even be done on the job at work, where you're switching on the pelvic floor and switching on those deep core stabilizers, just as a matter of practice when you're doing anything that involves load through your body. And then that just becomes a habit. It becomes an unconscious habit, and you're building that foundation really strongly. So with the strength side of things, we've certainly seen that, and it sounds like you might have had that situation where you're probably a bit over-focused on the muscles that you see building, and not so much on those deeper core stabilizers that they're actually really important in the background.
It's funny you say that, because a couple of years ago I started doing yoga, and I'd never done any yoga before, but I was told that I needed to start meditating. So I tried meditating and couldn't do that because I can't sit still. So I was told if you can't meditate very well, try doing yoga, because it's like meditation with movement. So I started doing that, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I thought it was fantastic. And it's funny what you say about like once you start doing something, it becomes a bit of a habit and you just do it without even thinking about it. Because I noticed even the way I was standing, I was engaging my core and I was doing all this stuff that we were learning and that yoga was teaching me, but I was sort of doing it on a subconscious level then. And it's really amazing how much that sort of affected everything else I've done. I mean, even to the point of now, like surfing's improving and skiing's improved and all this stuff, which I would never have really correlated to previously, but it all sort of tied back to, I suppose, that core strength that's been improved and the flexibility and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, look, it's amazing. The brain's an incredibly adaptable and flexible thing, Matt, as you found out. And once you give it a little bit of that nice input, it's amazing how quickly it responds and it starts switching on muscles and you use your body in a different way.
Yep.
We see that with left-right sort of dominant patterns too. Where some people, and I've been guilty of this in younger years, really right, especially us right-handers, really right side focused and keep doing everything through that right side. And you actually put a bit of effort. And for me, years ago, when I was playing soccer and I wasn't really much chop on my left foot, and every time I was out on the left wing, I was having trouble. So I'd really worked hard at being more skillful with that left side of the body. And of course, that plasticity in the brain, that really didn't just help me with soccer, but found that there was a massive ripple effect in terms of the coordination through that side. So yeah, that's what we see. So a lot of tradies will be the same. They're tending to sort of keep favouring that stronger side all the time. So when you challenge yourself to do something a bit different, as you did, Matt, there's great rewards. But what you've tapped into there is really important. You've got to enjoy it as well. If you run into a bit of trouble or if you're trying to prevent injury and you just sort of do something because you feel like you should, it's probably not going to last very long. It's really important that you do it, you maybe do it with some friends so that it's also a bit of a social catch-up, or you do it in a way that works for you, as you did with yoga, because it's not going to be sustainable otherwise. And, there's always many ways to skin a cat. Like if you're talking just about strength, that might involve just walking the dog after work. It might involve some jogging. It might involve getting in the pool, even if you don't like swimming, even just jogging and walking through the water. Or it might involve, a class of Pilates or some sort of a sport or training or gym or physio ball. The list goes on and on. You've really got a lot of different ways in which you can achieve those results. And similarly with stretching, yoga's worked for you, and you've brought in a bit of mindfulness with that as well.
Yeah.
And just coming to those words, meditation and mindfulness, it's the sort of wording that's getting more acceptable, which is great, because
Absolutely.
I think what we've got to understand is that we're all reasonably comfortable with the concept of exercising our body for our health and well-being, but we also need to take that same approach to exercising our mind. So meditation sometimes feels a little bit of a stretch for people in terms of their interests. But if we can just talk about mindfulness, where you at least become more aware of your thoughts and more aware of the use of your body and your breathing and how you move, and that can be just very simple, short, sharp exercises that can be easily taught. You can look up this stuff on the internet as well and YouTube. That can really help. It just gets people a little bit more aware of how they sit, how they stand, how they move when they're at work, and it can make a massive difference.
Yeah. I suppose, realistically, we can talk about all this stuff. We can talk about yoga, Pilates, we can talk about meditation. But there's a lot of people out there that are listening and they're just going to be like, yeah, that's great, mate, but when am I actually going to fit this into my schedule? So if it's okay with you, I'd like to talk maybe a little bit about maybe some practical tips or advice or things that people can do to fit into a typical, tradies lifestyle. So, I'm on site at 7 a.m. I typically would probably have to drive, say, half an hour to get there. So, I'm leaving home at 6:30, maybe 6 o'clock. Probably not going to have a whole lot of time before work to do this. I've got my smoko on my lunch, in the middle of the day, which is normally 30 minutes. And then after work, I might knock off at, 3:30, 4 o'clock. So then I've got a bit of time after work. What are some things that, in your experience, if I'm sitting there listening to this podcast right now and I'm like, yeah, I know I've got to make a change, where can I start?
Yeah, it's a good point. So there's a lot you can do within the structure of a working day. And so at a toolbox meeting at the start of the day, when typically, be covering things like, what we're going to do that day and who's going to start where and what's going to happen, what the objectives for the day are. And an opportunity to have those discussions while doing a few quick stretches at the same time.
Yeah.
I recommend to a lot of tradies, and quite a few of them have found it really helpful, to have a TheraBand, which is like a resistance band. Just slips into your pocket. no weight, takes no room, and you can even just fit in a quick 10, 15 reps of that while you're standing there having your toolbox meetings, or even just a quick 1 or 2 minute break in between jobs.
In your experience, I mean, obviously it will be somewhat specific to the person, but is there like a general set of exercises that you would recommend to the, I suppose, the majority?
Yeah, sure. So with the, we talked about the core and pelvic floor through that sort of lower abdominal area.
Mm-hmm.
Another area of core stabilising that's really important is the shoulder muscles, the rotator cuff and what we call the shoulder blade retractors, the muscles between your shoulder blades.
Yep.
So that's, if you imagine you're standing up tall like a soldier standing to attention, and you just gently draw your shoulder blades back together using the TheraBand as a bit of resistance in front of your body.
Okay.
And we're just talking about really lightweight exercise there, just gently drawing those shoulder blades together as though you're standing tall like a soldier standing to attention.
Yep.
That's a really nice, simple little exercise that tradies can do just in those little breaks. Another similar one, you stand up nice and straight, you get your chest puffed out, you're standing nice and tall like a soldier. This time your elbows are bent and you just gently pull the hands away from each other against the resistance of the TheraBand. A little bit like playing a piano accordion, if you can picture that.
With your elbows up against your side?
Yeah. So your elbows are bent at right angles, and you're just gently drawing those arms away from each other with your elbows tucked into your side.
Yep.
And that, again, just wakes up those core stabilisers between your shoulder blades and also your rotator cuff, the little muscles that stabilise your shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a couple of good, simple little exercises. I nearly always start with those with the tradies because it's really simple to do.
What about, I mean, they obviously do a lot of digging and crouching down and things like that. Is there anything on the lower body? Yeah,
so in terms of something that's fairly easy to do at work, you can just be standing in what we call A-standing. So you've got your legs, your feet apart, and just gently stretching side to side, gently stretching, arching your back backwards, and then just bending slowly forwards, just creeping down towards the floor, just in all those 4 directions is quite nice. If you've got a little chair or a stool you can sit on, another nice one is just have your knees just bent slightly and then just gently slump forward. So you're really curling your body forward and sliding your hands down your shins so that your forehead's coming down towards your knees. Yep. And then when you've gone as far as comfortable, just to hold that and try and hold that for 10 to 20 seconds and just breathing easily. So they're the sorts of simple exercises. You don't need to be in a gym or a Pilates studio to do that sort of stuff. You can easily do that type of thing on the job. We've seen quite a few tradies just bringing those things in. As I say, often they're bringing them in a little bit later in their career once they've already experienced the trouble with injury. That we'd encourage people to be doing that, even before they're having any trouble. And there's workplace teams out there that they just all do it.
Yeah.
So that's a matter of just biting the bullet, and it takes a bit of leadership. It takes a bit of maybe a bit of. People have a bit of a laugh about it and think it might be a bit silly at the start, but if you just bite that bullet and get a team doing that and it just becomes routine, then everyone's benefiting in it, and pretty soon doesn't feel like a silly thing to do. It feels like a pretty sensible and helpful thing to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, I 100% agree, and I'll fly the flag there for you because I've been in that position where I was like, this is the weirdest thing ever. I don't know why. I feel like an absolute freak doing this stuff, but then after a while, you start seeing the benefits, and it's like, wow, you know what? That actually kind of makes sense.
And there's a great ripple effect with it too, Matt, because at first you might seem like the odd one out if you're doing that, but I'd say that it's easier said than done. But so you're better to be the odd one out, pain-free, than joining the rest of the crew and getting aches and pains that are, threatening everything that you stand for. So,
yeah, that's right.
That's part of the motivation. But I think you find pretty quickly that others would want to join, and then you get that nice tipping point where it's a normal thing to do rather than an abnormal thing.
No, absolutely, and I'm already seeing it. A lot of friends now are sort of taking interest in the stuff I've been doing, and they're wanting to come along now. So, I mean, you're right. Someone's got to sort of pave the way, and then everyone will sort of see what's happening and jump on board. I want to talk quickly about, I suppose, injury prevention as opposed to I mean, obviously, exercise is important, and we all, well, most of us should at least appreciate that. However, I'd like to sort of understand a little bit more about the role of exercise in the space of preventing injury. Can you maybe touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of injury prevention for tradies, I guess one of the first points to make around that is the advantage of being a tradie and the advantage of the physical activity that's in that role.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really come to light in the last 3 years, and we've seen a huge amount of evidence about the harmful effects of being sedentary at work, in other words, just sitting for long periods. So there's a big point that I make with tradies now in the manual handling training that we run and the, and the one-on-one ergo assessments that we do. I say, look, you've got some challenges, which we'll talk about today, but the big picture is you're moving your body in a way that we've evolved over the years to do. So,
yeah, exactly.
That's the good news. And if you can just actually pull it off and do this in a healthy way and not find yourself being kind of forced into situations where you're not moving in a helpful way, then actually you're going to be fitter and healthier than most other people in the workforce.
Yeah.
So that's an important starting point. But in terms of the keys to preventing injury and aches and strains, it really starts first and foremost with your decision making. That's the key. Like making good choices at work. And that's around not allowing yourself just to be rushed, but actually stopping and saying, you know what, if I work at 80% pace here and get the job done in a way that's not going to put me at injury risk, that's a far better long-term result for everyone concerned, employer, yourself, your family, than rushing to get that extra 20% done and putting myself at risk.
Mm.
So you need to approach it with that type of mindset. We talked about risk management. Every single task that you do, you should really know, you should be pretty confident about a good way of designing that task, or at least the best way that's possible, so that you're minimising the strain. So sometimes just like, getting those loads a little bit closer to the body by taking those extra couple of steps closer in rather than reaching for things, just using the trolleys and using the wheelbarrows and using the tools around rather than just throwing things around using your own elbow grease.
Mm.
Things like loading and unloading out of vehicles. So vehicles are getting better and better at being, having side trays that come down so that you're loading and unloading at waist height, rather than back in the day, a lot of tradies' vehicles, you'd have to sort of hoik the loads over fixed side trays.
Yeah.
And that action of sort of hoiking something up at or over shoulder height repetitively. So it's around what we call task design and really making sure you've done everything you can to eliminate, ideally, or at least minimise the risks associated with doing those tasks. So you couldn't make that point more strongly. I know it's sort of getting a bit sort of technical there, but just stepping back with a bird's eye view, and this is where OpHealth physios come into play, along with other safety professionals as well, where sometimes we just come in with that industry knowledge and seeing what other organisations do and seeing what's been working and just those fresh eyes. But to the tradies, I'd say also just step back from it sometimes and say, what am I doing here that could be redesigned to be done safer?
Yeah.
And, are there some tasks here that we really need to start again and find out a better way of doing it?
Yeah, excellent. And so, I suppose now what I wouldn't mind asking you about is, like we've touched on, I suppose, things that people can do to, like, things people can start doing now to, sort of get them moving a little bit more, and exercises and whatnot. Is this all part of the program that you guys have put together with the with the Tradies National Health Month? Is there a place or a resource where listeners can go to and they can actually get information on this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So through the APA website, there's some really good information around this, and also there's a specific website. So Tradies National Health Month has a website as well, and they're the two main sources of online information.
Yep.
And there's some some good toolkits and summaries around this. Few stats too, just to sort of make it realistic around the fact that I think you spoke about these already with Chris, around the fact that the lower back is the area that we're seeing most of the challenges with upper limbs and shoulders fairly close second with tradies, so that's a specific to tradies sort of problem. And then slips and trips that are coming in to the ankles and knees coming in third places, something that's a problem. So, there's some online resources there.
Do you ever find, David, like you get a lot of people that so as a trader, you're often out there, you're pretty active for the most of the day, you're lifting, you're doing all this stuff, carrying things. Do you ever come across people that might have that argument with, well, I work in a physical job, I'm already fit, I don't need to do anything else?
Yeah, look, as I say, I think if tradies are working full time and they're doing it really well, they're actually really conscious of how they use their body. It's one of the fabulous advantages of that kind of work. And so I think that it's reasonable in terms of their cardio fitness and potentially also their core strength that they would recognise, hey, I use my muscles well, I'm aware of my core stabilisers, and that side of things is covered. Probably the only thing with tradies that doesn't necessarily get covered in the tasks that they do, they might need to put a bit of extra effort into, is just the stretching.
Exactly.
So, that's the area where stretching's a funny one. We all need to keep up our flexibility as best we can, and it's really just something you've just got to knuckle down and do some stretches every day. There's some people who are a bit luckier than others on that front, Matt, and some people maintain reasonable flexibility with less effort than others.
Yeah.
I've always been someone who's I've got to do a bit more work on a daily basis to keep my flexibility up. So you'll find that does vary a bit from individual to individual, but so flexibility is probably the one that we find the tradies does get missed. And sometimes body awareness, which through yoga you would have found there's some great benefits with that.
I noticed one of the things that made a big difference to me was just having a morning coffee in like the squat position. So as ridiculous as it might sound to listeners, just opening up your hips and getting your, I suppose that thoracic mobility happening and stuff like that, that was really, that's really been beneficial to me. And I noticed that straight away after doing that for a month, the advantages of that when I was surfing.
Yeah, great. No, that's a really good one. Yeah, I think if you've got a good flexible spine, it makes a massive difference, doesn't it, which you've noticed. When your spine's flexible, so positions like that, and you learn these in yoga, and even just at the end of the day, like getting a gym ball or physio ball, they're sort of the same, different names for the same thing, and just stretching back over that can be a really nice way to help open up the spine and increase your flexibility through the thoracic spine, which is your middle back.
Yeah.
There's some great stretches like that just help keep that flexibility through the spine. The TheraBand exercises that I mentioned can really help too. They help improve your posture and keep your flexibility up through your upper back.
Yeah.
So a lot of the work that tradies do does have them down in that sort of crouch position or slightly forward position for long durations. So if you can use some exercise to help balance that out, that can make a big difference.
There's a lot of listeners out there that would be, I suppose, in a scenario where they are tradies, but they might not necessarily be out there on the tools. So effectively, a lot of them may be sitting in offices and, quoting up jobs and doing all this kind of stuff, estimating, etc. What are some of the pitfalls that you can see with that typical sort of office style job, and how can we go about alleviating or reducing the risk of injury?
Yeah, sure. So, to have a mix of some, the physical manual tasks as well as getting into the office and sitting for periods of time. If you've got a mix of those two, that's actually often the sweet spot. So, you're getting those rest breaks. But if we're talking about risks in the office and sitting down at the desk, they're becoming more and more obvious over the years that those risks are pretty substantial. If you're getting up and moving fairly regularly, you'll at least every 30, 45 minutes, you'll pretty much reduce your risks of what we have seen is a problem with sedentary work, which is cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, increased bowel cancer rates, and premature death as well, which always jumps off the stats sheet. So those sort of things aren't so much a risk with that sort of workforce that you're talking about, where you're getting a bit of a mix. They are a risk, though, with people who are desk-bound in a full-time capacity. But the risks that are still there are more to do with your musculoskeletal, so to do with your posture in that position. So if you haven't got a chair that you really that it's been well set up for you, or you know how to use well, or if the chair doesn't really fit you properly, or if the chair's broken, which is more often the case than we'd like to see. That's very common.
Milk carton.
Then you might be, yeah, exactly, or sitting in inadequate things like that. God, you'd be amazed how often we see it, where people's choice of chairs. This is not just with tradies and their desk work, but I was at a law firm recently where this happened. It happens a lot. I've seen it in all sorts of different sectors where they simply were just sitting on chairs that weren't designed for the job.
Right.
So it happens, and that can really have a massive effect on your posture, and therefore you're sitting with your head forward for long periods of time rather than being nice and balanced.
Yeah.
So sitting with your head forward's really the big risk factor when you're in an office job.
Like looking down, you mean?
I mean that. Imagine that sort of chicken neck posture where you're poking the chin forward and your head's ahead of the rest of your body. If that makes sense. So
I get you. Yep. Okay. Yep.
So the chicken neck or the U neck posture, that type of craning forward position, so that protruding chin, that's a really common situation. A lot of your listeners probably now checking themselves to see if they're doing that at the moment.
Myself
but
included.
It's really, yeah, exactly, and myself included as well.
Put my glasses back on.
It's really important that you're actually, it's right, confessions of a podcast. It's really important that you're actually sitting in a position where your head's back and over your centre of gravity. So one of the myths that people don't really understand about sitting in an office environment is that actually we should be back at a recline of around 10 to 20 degrees.
Leaning back?
That's right, yeah, just slightly back. Yeah, so there you go. You've learned something today. So being slightly back between 10 and 20 degrees changes your relationship with gravity so that gravity is encouraging you to stay in your chair. Whereas if you try to be too upright, then you find your chin comes forward and that can become a problem. So having a chair that really facilitates that is really important.
All right, look, we're going to get to the end of this episode. We're going to get to wrapping up, conscious of time. So what I'm going to ask you for is 3 actionable tips for listeners out there, things they can go and implement right away, which is going to, I suppose, help them be fitter for work.
Yeah, it's really one more thing that, just to clarify, that we might not have talked about enough is just about the team culture as well. So to really encourage that tradies try and, participate in a way that they're part of a culture, what the safety circle team called it, speak up culture rather than a shut up culture. So it's really encouraged to talk about how you prevent injury and how you make jobs safer. And it's a team culture. That's the way we do things around here.
So can you elaborate on that?
That's really, yeah. So we've got to remember that tradies are part of a workplace culture, and the more the workplace culture is promoting people to speak up and come up with ideas about how they can improve safety, and design their task in a way that helps minimise injury.
Yeah.
The better off that team's going to be. So that takes leadership from upper managers.
Mm-hmm.
It takes upper managers really leading by example. It takes effort, like developing a culture within a team where they're willing to have those conversations and willing to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
These things. It takes upper leader management. It takes a lot of effort on behalf of an organisation to really foster that sort of culture. So that's really important as well.
Yeah, cool.
That they're participating in that way and willing to say, hey, you know what, I reckon we do this a different way. I've got some ideas. Let's try and do it like this. I think it's going to make it easier for all of us. And for those ideas to be accepted and listened to and at least considered rather than, oh, mate, what would you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, really, that's really important. That's what we see in this work a lot, that people who are in safety culture teams or teams that promote safety in the organisation, that's the real key. So just wanted to make that point around teamwork.
No, it's good. And I wonder as well, David, do you ever see scenarios, I know a client of mine down in Melbourne actually, the guys that, I suppose I'll give him a shout out, Plan B Plumbing, Anthony, I saw a post on his Facebook the other day and he had his team all together doing they were doing yoga, I think it was, or he got all of his employees in the same room doing something. Do you ever see that scenario happening?
Yeah, we do, and it's a great sign of the culture of the organisation that, it says, hey, we care about you, hey, we're prioritising your health and well-being, So it's about what it does physically, but probably more importantly, it's also about just that what the message that you're giving the workers and saying, hey, we understand that we want you to be fit and well for the long term, and we know that's a big priority. And what we've talked about a lot with Tradies National Health Month is that for tradies, their greatest tool in their toolkit is their health and well-being, their fitness. And they're not going to have any more important tool than that. Really, everything else that they have has to work around that as a first and foremost priority. So, if that's not being fostered and encouraged in the workplace, then, the priorities need to be looked at.
That's certainly not specific to tradies. That's pretty relevant to anyone.
No, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's the focus of this month's campaign, but there's certainly a lot in that for all of us.
All right. So
I'd say just to wrap up the three key things.
Yep.
So firstly, participate as a team member in terms of being, to participate in terms of being willing to make your voice heard and come up with ideas about how things can be done safer.
Yep.
If you're not listened to, then try again and keep on listening and keep on trying till you are listened to. So being willing to participate in a positive safety culture is the first important thing.
Yeah.
The second thing I'd say is the importance of risk management. So being part of risk management by actually really problem solving, working with your teammates, looking at the tasks with fresh eyes every now and then and saying, hey, is there a better way we can do this? So really being willing to participate in risk management and reduce all of those risks as much as practical to do so. And then the third thing that's important is just taking individual responsibility as well. Even when organisations have really worked through all the tasks and made them as safe and efficient as possible, still at the end of the day, we need to be fit and healthy and take responsibility to be fit for purpose as well. So we've talked about the importance of being strong enough, being flexible enough, and being body aware enough as well. So they're the three things. Be part of a good team, be willing to participate in risk management and have your voice heard in terms of how to make jobs safer. And thirdly, take individual responsibility as well and recognise that your health and well-being is the greatest tool in your toolkit.
Beautiful. And I suppose I'd just like to say to all the listeners out there, go out there and find something or like a program in your local area. It might be yoga, it might be just join a gym, it might be you might be some sort of strength training, flexibility, whatever it is, just go and find something and start getting involved. And, you might make it easier to find a mate to do it with, but just sell out to it, lock a time in your calendar and just get it done. I mean, it's as David said, you don't get second chance at you've only got one copy of your body, so you may as well make it count.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Matt.
All right. Well, look, I think that wraps up this episode. David and I will be back in the following episode, and we're going to be talking about safety on the job. So we'll wrap that up now, David, unless you had anything else to add.
No, that's great. Thanks, Matt.
All right. Perfect. Stay tuned. That's a wrap. Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to the siteshed.com where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from the show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.